Hello and welcome to The Signal, Workplace NL's Health and Safety Podcast. Workplace NL is the Workers' Compensation Board in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. The focus is to promote safe and healthy workplaces, provide return-to-work programs, and offer compensation to injured workers and their dependents. This series of podcasts will provide you with the latest information on how workplaces can protect the health and safety of workers. Please enjoy the show.
Effective March 1st of 2024, there were some changes to the provincial occupational health and safety requirements for workplace occupational health and safety committees, as well as occupational health and safety programs. I'm DeeAnne Feltham-Scott, OHS Educational Consultant in Prevention Services. Today, we are joined by Joanne Woodland. She is also an Occupational Health and Safety Educational Consultant at Workplace NL. So, Joanne, let's just start by you giving us just a little overview of what those changes are.
Yes, DeeAnne. Amendments to the OHS Act were passed in the House of Assembly last spring for new requirements for the occupational health and safety programs and committees. And it came into effect, like you said, March 1st, 2024. Basically, the new requirements raise the worker threshold for occupational health and safety programs and committees from 10 or more to 20 or more workers at a worksite. So for many years, we have been educating and promoting that here in the province, if you have 10 or more workers, you are required to have an occupational health and safety committee and a program in place.
Right.
That number has now changed to 20.
Right. And we always referred to that as the magic number.
We did. So now we have a new magic number, which is 20.
Right. And as well as the changes with the requirements for the Occupational Health and Safety Program, employers with 19 or less workers are no longer required to have this program. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So lots of changes.
Definitely.
Lots of big changes as well. So why were these changes made?
Basically, these changes were made to make it a little easier for smaller workplaces to comply with the Occupational Health and Safety Act without compromising the health and safety of their workers. These amendments were also put in place to harmonize the requirements for occupational health and safety committees and programs across other jurisdictions, because throughout the country, everybody else, the number was 20. And Newfoundland and Labrador was the only province that had the 10 or more.
And I guess too, Joanne, like with all of the intra-provincial work that's going on, it probably did get like a little confusing at times. So this just harmonizes everybody basically to be on the same page.
Yeah, that's true, DeeAnne. Oftentimes I would have calls from international companies or from head office, say, in another province, and they would be trying to get information from me about what the provincial legislation here in Newfoundland was, because they had work locations here, and they may have been responsible for the occupational health and safety for that workplace. Right. So it does make it a little bit easier for more harmonized, across Canada.
Right.
Now, that being said, that's not to say that anybody in that group now, like if you had 15 workers, for example, and you had a committee established and you had your program established, that's not to say that you can't maintain that committee and program on a go-forward basis as a best practice. Yeah. We certainly encourage that. However, the only difference will be is you are no longer required or will have the ability to submit OHS meeting minutes in Workplace NL's Connect system. So you may have noticed, and again, I've had several employers reach out questioning changes to their status in the Connect system from an OHS type to a worker health and safety type in the system. So if you are in that group between the 10 and 20, you may see that your status has changed in Connect and you no longer have the ability to submit OHS meeting minutes in there.
Right.
So that's fine. You don't have to do that, but we still encourage that you take minutes if you're continuing to have your committee, and you just maintain your records in your own workplace however you wish to do that.
Exactly.
If you still want to use our form, that's fine too, but just document and maintain your own records.
Yeah. And I mean, that form, that's been used for years, and it's a very effective way of keeping track of the committee's records. So absolutely, even though you don't have to submit it to us anymore, if you have 19 or less workers, it's still a great way to keep all of the committee activities organized. Okay, so let's just talk about now the training requirements. So a committee must be established when there are 20 or more workers in the workplace. Got that. The representative, that must be established in workplaces when there are 19 or less workers. And a designate must be established where there are less than 6 persons engaged in work at a workplace. Do these changes affect any of the training requirements?
So the training requirements remain the same. So the only thing that's really changed is you determining whether you're required to have a committee or a rep.
Right.
Once you've figured that out, that'll lead you to what training you need to do. So, and we did change the training last year, so I'll give a quick review of how that looks now.
Right.
But the training you need if you are required to have a committee, so if you're in that group of 20 or more now, then you have to complete the level 1 OHS committee, worker representative, and designate certification training, as well as the level 2 OHS committee member training. So you have to do both levels if you are training committee members, and it's 2 days, level 1 and level 2.
And I guess, want to remind listeners that this training is facilitated by only Workplace NL approved training providers and trainers to deliver this level of training.
Exactly. That is a common misconception, I guess, that happens sometimes, but we don't do the training from Workplace NL.
No.
Some people say, they call here and say, oh, I need to get trained, but we don't do the training, but we approve the people that do the training.
Exactly.
So we have to approve them, and you can only receive this certification training from an approved Workplace NL approved training provider.
Let's say if an OSH officer arrived on a work site and asked for training records of the committee members, reps, or designates, and what was presented to them was not a current training certificate from one of our approved training providers or trainers, that would not be acceptable to that OSH officer. Am I right?
That's right, DeeAnne. They're going to look for a valid certification, which can be obtained through the certification training registry.
Right.
So that's where you should go to look for your training and to register for your training, and that's where you're going to find the list of approved training providers. And once you've completed the training through this system, you will actually have a certificate in that system. And actually the OSH officers have access to the CTR, so they can actually look up a worker's training if they need to do so, if for some reason they don't have it or they don't have access to it themselves.
So I did get a little bit ahead of myself, but I really wanted to remind listeners of that. So that is training. That's the level 1 and the level 2 training for the OSH committee members. What about the training for the representatives and the designates? What are they required to do?
So if you're required to have a rep or designate in your workplace, so that group of 19 or less now, then you would only do the level 1. So just the 1 day, the first day training. So like I said, for more information, I would recommend that you look into our certification training registry, which you can get to from our website. If you just go on workplacenl.ca and click on right up in the right-hand corner, it says access our online services.
Perfect. So you also mentioned earlier that this change is also applied to the requirement for having an occupational health and safety program. So what does that mean for employers and workplaces?
Yeah, so again, it's just that number has changed. So before, if you had 10 or more, you were required to have a committee and an occupational health and safety program. So now the Act says where 20 or more workers are employed at a workplace, the employer shall establish and maintain an occupational health and safety program in accordance with the regulations.
Right.
Which is a change, of course, because it was previously 10. While workplaces with less than 20 are not required to have a documented OHS program, they are still required to meet the same legislative requirements of a program. So basically, sometimes even though you're not required to have the program, it's helpful to have the program in place because, you still have to do those things like your workplace inspections, your incident investigations, identify hazards. So, having that formal program in place, yes, that kind of guides you in how you're going to do all that. So,
right. Yeah. I kind of like to say, just because you have 19 or less workers does not mean that those workers are not at the same risk that workers are exposed to in workplaces where there are 20 or more. Employers are required to identify all health and safety hazards in the workplace and to put measures in place that is either going to eliminate the hazard completely or to reduce risk of harm to workers. So I just think that having that occupational health and safety program, it's a nice, tidy, organized way for any employer to maintain health and safety records, practices, policies, and procedures so that workers are given the best opportunity to remain healthy and safe in the workplace. So I would imagine as well that these requirement changes have also affected and resulted in some changes to our new Prime program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely. These changes did prompt us to adjust the changes that we were already in the process of making to the Prime program. We were well into developing a new Prime program, and then this kind of threw a little wrench into that, but that's okay. In the new Prime program, employers will be categorized into two paths. So there's no longer small, medium, large. Right. You are now Path 1 or Path 2 employer. So Path 1 is OHS Education, and Path 2 is OHS Leadership Certification. So Path 1 is in effect now and applies to employers who either pay less than $10,000 in average base assessments, regardless of the number of workers.
Doesn't matter how many workers they have.
Exactly.
It's based on the assessments of less than 10,000.
Right.
Okay.
Or they pay $10,000 or more in average base assessments and have less than 20 workers at each worksite.
Okay.
There's a little catch there.
Right.
But the Path 2 will be transitioned in over the next couple of years and will apply to employers who pay $10,000 or more in average base assessments and have 20 or more workers at any worksite.
Right.
So again, it was only that we had to change that 10 to 20 number. Everything else was we still had the Path 1 and Path 2 when the new program established. We just had to change that number from 10 to 20.
Right.
An easy way to remember this, DeeAnne, is the difference between a Path 2 is that employers will meet both criteria for Path 2.
Right.
They pay $10,000 or more in average base assessments, and they have at least one worksite with 20 or more workers. All other employers will be a Path 1. So, reach out, and there will be a lot of education over the next few years as we transition into this new program.
Yeah. And you know what? With any changes that are being made, there's always new things that we learn and just a way, I guess, of moving forward and becoming better. At the end of the day, all we want is for workers to be protected and to be safe from any type of harm in the workplace. So you mentioned that Path 2 as well is going to be transitioned in over the next couple of years. So what does that mean for our listeners?
Okay, so basically I'll start from the beginning of the transition to the new Prime program. So in 2023, we rolled out Path 1 for employers who pay less than $10,000 in average base assessments and have less than 10 workers at each worksite. This year in 2024, we expanded the definition of employers who will be Path 1 due to the legislative changes, and then At this point in time, Path 1 has now been fully rolled out, and any employers who fall into that category will need to fulfill the new criteria in order to receive their prime refund going forward. So if you are a Path 1 and you're unsure about your criteria, reach out to us and we'll get you up to speed on that.
Okay.
Also, during 2024, Workplace NL will be finalizing the requirements for the Path 2 employers, which will include the details of a 15-element OHS program.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in the past, we've always promoted a 10-element program through Workplace NL. Yeah. Now, with the Path 2 Prime program, we will be transitioning employers and assisting employers in moving forward and developing a 15-element OSH program in their workplace.
Right.
In addition, we will be, of course, providing education on these 15 elements and helping workplaces prepare for developing their programs in 2025. We will be, like I said, rolling out education and resources during that time.
Right.
In 2025, workplaces will continue to develop their 15-element program in preparation for the audits in 2026. And that's when we will begin auditing in Path 2. And again, I'll cover details about auditing, and that's changed a little bit as well.
Right.
With some self-audits from employers and then Workplace NL audits. So again, lots of details to come about the new Prime program. We will still have medium and large employers during the transition.
Right.
And the medium and large will be phased out into your Path 2 over the next couple of years.
Once Path 2 is fully rolled out.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Duties are not written in the OSH Act for representatives or for designates. But Section 44, which is duties of representatives, gives them the same duties and responsibilities as the committee when it is reasonably practicable. So what does this mean?
Yeah, so that basically means there's no specific duties written out for representatives or designates. But all Section 44 says is it gives representatives the same duties and responsibilities of a committee. Mm-hmm. The role of the committee, representative, and designate is to monitor the health and safety and welfare of workers and support OHS activities in the workplace.
Right.
So, I mean, you're still looking at under Section 39 of the OHS Act, committees have the legislative duty to seek to identify unhealthy and unsafe conditions, participate in workplace inspections, make recommendations, establish and promote occupational health and safety programs, maintain records, and on and on. So, really, if you're looking at it through that lens, your representatives and your designates are still going to do the same things that a committee would do in the workplace.
Right. And I guess another point to highlight is that all of these duties are done in consultation with the employer. They are not done in isolation of the employer. It's a team approach where there is a joint responsibility for protecting the health and safety of workers.
Yep. Like you mentioned, the piece that in legislation that outlines the duties of an employer has not changed.
No.
So, employers have a legal responsibility to make sure that OHS committees, reps, designates are established in accordance with legislation and in their workplace to provide. And, they have to provide them with the resources necessary to perform their duties.
Yeah.
So, that, it may sound overwhelming. It may sound like a lot, but reach out to us. That's what we're here to do, is to educate employers, to help them meet their legislative duties and their responsibilities and help them facilitate that process in the workplace.
Right. And we do have an Occupational Health and Safety Committee coordinator here at Workplace NL in Prevention Services, who is available to answer any questions, not just regarding the OSH committee, but as well as representatives and designates.
That's right, because as we mentioned, some of those duties and responsibilities are the same and they cross over. So, reach out to our OHS committee coordinator or one of our health and safety advisors or myself and DeeAnne. As OHS Educational Consultants, we can certainly answer those questions.
Absolutely. So in conclusion, I just want to remind listeners that the occupational health and safety legislation sets a minimum standard. The optimal situation is always to have a committee and an occupational health and safety program with management and labor working together to address safety concerns. Well, thank you, Joanne, for joining me and just getting us up to speed on some of the changes that have been made regarding the Occupational Health and Safety Committee, as well as the Occupational Health and Safety Program, and then, of course, how this is going to affect the prime changes that some of them are already in place, but some other upcoming changes. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me, DeeAnne.
Thank you for joining us today. Transcripts are available to use in your workplace to increase workers' knowledge in various occupational health and safety topics. Visit workplacenl.ca for more information on the services we provide to workplaces. Feel free to share the signal on social media to improve workplace health and safety everywhere. Thank you, and have a safe and healthy day.